Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Singularity One-on-One. Singularity One-on-One is a regular feature of Singularity weblog where you can go and see it or download it in full. Today my guest on the show is Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly helped launch Wired magazine and was its exclusive editor for its first 7 years. He has written for the New York Times, The Economist, Science, Time, and the Wall Street Journal, among many other publications. His previous books include Out of Control and the best-selling New Rules for the New Economy. Kevin lives in Pacifica, California. Welcome, Kevin. It's very nice to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Let's not waste any time and jump straight into the questions. I would like to start from the beginning, if I may, just like you started your book at the beginning of the universe a few billion years ago. I wouldn't like to start as far back, but maybe as far back as a little bit about your background and more specifically how you got to be interested in the impact and progress of technology.
I think the origins of this book is probably goes back to my own history in being a college dropout, spending a lot of time in Asia, where I was in remote areas that had very little technology of any modern sort. And I spent a lot of my time living with people who had very little material goods, most of it being stone or rope and fabric and not very much high tech. And they seemed to be able to be content with at a certain level with all this material, and I also was comfortable not owning very much, and I came back and I rode my bicycle, which was the only thing I owned at that time, across America, and I interacted with the Amish, who are have a reputation for dismissing technology, and I had a lot of respect for them. And so there was one side of me that liked to keep technology at arm's length, but at the same time, I got involved with the Whole Earth Catalog, which was a publication that did user-written reviews, and it was part of the kind of the hippie movement where we were trying to make very select, appropriate technology. So we were trying to use technology that was appropriate to what we needed and no more. And from that came my migration into my experience online very early in the 1980s. And there I saw a different facet of technology. It was very communal. It seemed very appropriate, and yet it was very high tech. And that began to change my mind about what I thought about technology. And as that kind of expanded, Wired started, and eventually I became very involved with high tech, and now run a website called Cool Tools where there's lots of tech. And throughout that, I was getting the idea that maybe technology was something we wanted more of. And so I wrote the book to kind of answer my own question about this, which was, what do I really think about technology? Is there a theory or a framework for helping me decide what I should think about it?
So it is kind of encompassing the past, the present, and the future of technology as you see it. But I would like to go a little deeper and ask you, what is the motivation? Why would that question be so important for you, or for anyone else for that matter? What was your specific personal motivation to begin searching for an answer?
Well, if you think about it, technology is without a doubt the most powerful force on this planet. It has a planetary scale effect in terms of climate change and the way that we humans have used our tools to alter both the face of the earth and even our own bodies. And so with that, and then we're surrounding ourselves with all this stuff. We spend most of our day in some ways dealing with technology, in contact with technology, and many of us are involved in making more of it. We're inventing it. We're spending our time trying to sell it or buying it. And I was just asking myself, what is all this stuff? What does it mean? Is it good? Is it how does it relate to nature? How does it relate to the cosmos? What is the significance of this? And if we look at it in the future and to where it's going, that might be one way we can answer the question of like, well, okay, here we are in 2010, we have all this technology. In another 1,000 years, or even 500 years, or even 100 years, if we had 1,000 times as much, is that good? And so I think this question of trying to answer and delve into the nature of it is actually vital, because it's so important in our lives.
So in that sense, would you say that your motivation was scientific curiosity? Was it sociological? Was it ethical, in the sense of trying to figure out whether technology brings good or bad dimension to our lives and our existence? Was it religious?
I would say it was
humanitarian?
I would say it was all the above. I would say basically we have no theory, and if you ask ethically, spiritually, scientifically, culturally, what technology is, there's really kind of no answer. It's like, well, it's just one thing. Maybe it's things that we invented in our minds, but there's no framework, no theory about evolution. It's like having biology without a theory of evolution. It's like, well, it's just one organism after another. And here we had the same thing. It's just more stuff. And I think that it was more than that. I think my suspicion is that there was something greater than just one invention after another. That there is a framework, a basis, a logic,
an inherent
meaning,
pattern or tendency.
A pattern, something that unifies this, and most importantly, what I discovered is that it connects it actually to life.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you another cotangent question here, just to try and understand your sort of foundational starting points here. I think it was the article about you on Wikipedia, and I don't know how accurate it was or not, but somewhere...
You don't believe everything Wikipedia says?
Well, I'd like to double check and cross-reference it. I do read it, but I'd like to cross-reference it usually.
Sure.
And I find it gets more and more accurate than, say, it was 10 years ago when it was just horrible. But it says that you're a devout Christian.
Yes, that's true.
Now, that came to me as a huge surprise, even after I've read like a 400-page book written by you on the topic of technology. So for me, another interesting dimension of you and the book and the sort of interplay between the two was, how do you reconcile your religious beliefs with the question that you asked and with the sort of intellectual child that you gave birth to? And,
right.
I mean, do you have to at all reconcile it? Are they perfectly compatible, or is there some friction, or how is that working out?
I don't feel any friction between that. I mean, I think that I think that it's called the spiritual dimensions of technology are in line with the moral dimensions, with the cultural dimensions. And so from my mind, even though I didn't spend a lot of time talking about the spiritual dimensions, I don't see any conflict with the scientific dimension of technology. So I'm happy to talk about the spiritual dimensions if you want to go in that direction, but I don't feel that they're in any conflict with the scientific or the ethical or the moral dimensions.
Well, I'd like to cross over different disciplines and try and connect a bigger picture, both of us as beings and of our subject of interest.
Sure.
Here. And in that sense, so you don't find a contradiction between, say, genetic engineering or stem cell research or advanced robotics and nanotechnology, or even the so-called designer babies with advanced, or chosen genetic traits before their birth, etc. You don't find any contradiction with your religious beliefs there?
No, not at all. In fact, I think that what's important to understand, of course, is that all these things that you just mentioned, I think are all inevitable technologies that are going to come down, and we as humans, we have created our own humanity. We have we through our minds have invented ourselves and have created humanity. So even humanity itself is a technology. And what we're standing on right now, it's not a fixed entity. I mean, in the book, I talk about the fact that we are a process. And so
I actually tweeted that we are a process and not an entity. Right. That's one of my favorite quotes.
Right. And so part, and I even talk about in the fact that the Amish have a kind of a very stationary, static view of human nature, that it is fixed. And I think that is one of the big differences. And there certainly are a lot of religious people who believe in the idea that there's a sacred, fixed human nature.
Especially in Christianity, I would say.
Especially in Christianity, exactly right. Although I don't see any, I don't think that's actually necessary to believe that. And so the idea that we are not just trying to figure out who we are, but actually trying to figure out who we can be, that is, to me, that's, that's an assignment worthy of a great God.
You see, I agree with everything you say. I love your book. I agree, and your approach and sort of theorizing or stylizing, if I can say, putting technology in a certain kind of a tendency and explaining it resonates deeply with me, and yet I find it very contradictory with the history of almost any religion, especially Christianity. I mean, with especially, ever since, even before the time of Galileo, the church had issues with both technology and progress. And so for me, that was almost shocking.
Yeah. I mean, I think the whole thing about belief systems, whether it's Christianity, Muslim, Jewish, or atheist, is that people do all kinds of things in the name of that don't necessarily, to me, represent the entire spectrum of all those who follow it. So what has been done, I mean, what atheists have done doesn't represent what all atheists believe. And I think the same thing about what's been done in the name of Christianity does not represent actually the inherent essential beliefs of that either. And, I don't think it's necessary for me to necessarily, in my book, apologize for everything that's been done in the name. But I do think that it's important to realize that the reason why I think Christianity has lasted for 2,000 years is that there's probably a lot more going on there than what appears in, say, the Tea Party Republicans. It's, I think there is something there.
At the very least, I would say yes. I agree entirely with you on that point too. Even though I am more of an agnostic on a good day, and on most days I'm actually an atheist, but I agree entirely with you. But then you have this tendency in the book, very open, and I kind of very much sympathize with it, to try and limit and minimize a lot of technologies while admitting the importance and the usage of certain ones. You're trying to sort of minimize the overall presence of many kinds of technologies in your own personal life.
Right.
So where does that originate in you? Is it sort of connected with religion in any way, or no?
No, I think it just temperamentally. And also, by the way, I think that's where my optimism comes from. I can justify it, but I think it's just temperamentally, personality. I'm an optimistic person. And the same thing, I think I am comfortable with little stuff. And even though I have a lot of stuff in my house, I lived most of my adult life before. I was 35 years old before I had a job. And so I was 35 years old before I had anything more than a bicycle. And so I spent most of my adult life with very little, and I was comfortable with that. And I think it's just personality. So, but I do think that I was involved with, of course, the Whole Earth Catalog, which was trying to also kind of find its way through this technology abundance. And I sympathize with the idea of trying to find the minimum amount, because I think with the minimum, you actually are able to, as an individual, you're actually able to come closer to fulfilling or expressing your talents. I think that there's an overhead that we spend on everything that we have in our lives. And so the more we start spending upkeeping things that we don't really need, the less we can spend time on actually revealing what we have. And I think, and so I came to this idea that I wanted to minimize in my personal life the amount. However, and like that's sort of like what the Amish do. It's what maybe some other people who are trying to live simply do. But I think that's not enough. I think that's why I'm not Amish. Is I think just that half of it, of trying to minimize it in your own life, is not good enough, because while we are minimizing in our own lives, we actually want to maximize it, the pool of possibilities for others, so they can actually then go through and minimize for them. The Amish are only doing the half of minimizing. They're not involved in trying to increase the possibilities for others. Mm-hmm. They depend on others actually to invent the things that they're going to use. So I think there's two halves that we need to be involved in: minimizing ours while maximizing others. And I think that kind of combination works for me.
So that's very interesting. That's another very interesting contradiction that I found, a slight contradiction. I mean, you do go to very good extent of explaining the Amish take on technology and ultimately repudiated by the fact that what you just said, that the minimalist lifestyle technology-wise is dependent on the maximalist, the maximum presence of technology overall globally, and it's entirely dependent on it. Right. Now, Stephen Johnson, I think, I had his book, it's over there on the shelf. He called your work the anti-Unabomber manifesto.
Yeah,
and I actually entirely agree with that. I think that's a very, very good way of sort of summing up the essence of your work. I mean, that's my opinion. Because it's, at the same time, a very logical and powerful repudiation of the Unabomber, while presenting an alternative, very optimistic and even more powerful logic.
Right.
So it's very compelling to me, but let's say most of our listeners and viewers would not have read the book just yet, because it just came a couple of weeks ago. So would you mind telling us what technology wants?
Yes. So, but I would like to say something about the Unabomber, because what people may not realize is actually I have a chapter in the book.
Yeah, you do.
Called "The Unabomber Was Right," and yet it's the anti-Unabomber manifesto.
Yeah.
And I just want to explain that for when people pick it up, they might not understand what we're talking about. So the idea is that what the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, who was a mathematics professor in real life, was talking about was he made a very, I thought, a very logical and almost objective appraisal of the ways in which the technology are so codependent upon each other, and we are so dependent upon it, that it has its own agenda. And in that assessment, I agree with them that it's the technologies that I'm talking about are not your iPhone as a standalone device. It's the fact that the iPhone requires 1,000 other technologies to produce it and maintain it, and each of those technologies probably require 100 technologies to support it. And so you have an ecosystem of technologies that are all dependent upon each other. And whenever you have ecosystems with kind of recursive interactions, you have this system exhibit two things. It exhibits behaviors that are not present in any of the parts, and you also exhibit behaviors that are recurring behaviors that are driven by the fact that it's a system. And so all this, the Unabomber talked about, and I agreed with him. But his conclusion about what the agenda, what technology wanted, I really disagreed with. And of course, his response, which was to feel that it justified him murdering people, I of course don't agree with at all. And so what I think he was right about is this idea that technology is not just a set of individual inventions, that it forms some superorganism, if you will, some higher level of a system, and that system has inherently some biases or agenda. Now, when I say want, I'm slightly provocative, but I mean it in the sense that it's not intelligent, it's not conscious, but it's a way that a plant system, the plant wants light, or a worm wants water. It is moving the entire system in a certain direction, and and want is not binary; it's a continuum. Bacterium have a little bit of want towards the nutrient grading, and we have more conscious wants, but there's a whole continuum. And I think the technium is sort of like, I don't know, it's like a flatworm, or it's like a bug that wants something. It's no more than that, but actually that's pretty powerful.
And what's even more important is that you stress that it is continuously evolving and becoming more and more sentient and more complex and more diversified, and et cetera, all of which are traits of life and of biology.
Right. So I make an analogy. I'm saying that basically the essence of living systems and life and evolution is mostly information processing. And we can show that in many ways by migrating biological processes into computers and things. And so I asked this question to begin with. I say, well, what's the direction in evolution in biological systems? Now, I am the first to admit that this is a controversial idea, but I say that actually any objective reckoning of this biological evolution over time shows that there are directions. This is not universally accepted in evolutionary theory today. It's only a minority of biologists who accept the fact that there is a move towards greater complexity, even though to almost any lay observer we say, yes, obvious. The problem has been actually quantifying this, because we have we don't really know what information is, we don't really know what complexity is, we don't have really good operational definitions of this, and so quantifying this is a problem, even though we intuitively understand that there is a kind of a one-way, a ratcheting of increasing complexity over 3.7 billion years. And not just because simple things have to get complex, because even in the middle, halfway complex things don't evolve towards simplicity. They always go the other direction overall on average. So I say, if the essence of biology is really kind of information processing, and it's really a continuum, a different facet that we see expressed in the technium, then the technium also is basically headed towards kind of as an extension, an acceleration of the same thing that evolutionary life is. It's kind of one big cosmic evolution. And so then I project and show some reasons why we should believe that technology, the technium, again, not the individual, but the system itself, is headed towards increasing complexity, increasing diversity, increasing specialization, increasing mutualism, increasing evolvability, among other things.
Well, again, I agree with everything that you've observed and theorized about philosophy, but what surprises me really is what's absent. And what I mean by this is this. In my view, your book would have been a perfect prequel to Ray Kurzweil's The Singularity is Near, right? Because you show the before story much better even than he does, and you sort of give 1,000,001 examples from all kinds of fields and kingdoms of biology, and make a very, very powerful argument that's kind of much easier to comprehend than the one he puts forward in his book. But what's absent in your book is that ultimate culmination. I mean, you for example, you do say that we are observing the tendency to greater complexity. And yet somehow in your book that doesn't culminate in a super enhanced, super computer, super powerful artificial intelligence. You don't. You do touch on the singularity, but very briefly and sort of
dismissing it.
Exactly. And the other day I watched a recording of you and Stephen Johnson again, I think at the library in New York, and you sort of dismissed quickly, both of you actually, the singularity.
Right.
So why is that? What is it that I'm missing? What connection do I make that you do not see there?
Right. Okay. No, I mean, this is a fair question. So I very consciously did not get into the singularity in this book for several reasons. One is because it is, I felt it was a distraction to this, because I think the singularity is a scenario. I think it's one scenario. In other words, I can actually imagine futures of the tech team that don't involve a singularity. Okay, and so because I don't see that as at least as I understand the term, I don't see that as an inevitability. I didn't talk about it because it was just going to be too complicated. So let me tell you about why I don't think it's inevitability. Again, as I understand it, first of all, as I understand it, there are multiple definitions or multiple things that we mean by the singularity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think the common perception, or at least the one that I'm kind of first reacting to, is Ray's. Is a popular understanding of Ray's version, because again, some of the things that Ray is claiming in his book is often misunderstood. So the common perception that I think Ray is not really kind of working against is this idea that what the singularity is going to yield very fast within another 30 years is AI that is capable of producing an AI that's even smarter than itself, and then an AI that's even far smarter than itself at a rapid rate, and that's so rapid that once we start this process, it will sort of almost seemingly instantaneous arrive at some super intelligence that can then solve most of the problems that we have, including this really vital problem of longevity or immortality. So it sort of grants us immortality, and with that we can kind of solve everything else. So there is a sense of reaching this heavenly state almost. And of course, then the whole agenda becomes just to live long enough to reach, to bridge across that gap. And that's why Ray is taking his 250 pills a day, whatever it is, to make it through there. Yeah. So that thing, I think, is just wrong. I think it's wrong. First of all, the timing is wrong. It's just not going to happen in that, because all the precursor things that we need are just not there. But
what, in your opinion, are the precursors?
Well, I mean, I think that I think this is a case of what I call thinkism. Yeah. Thinkism is this idea that just by thinking about things, you can solve problems. Okay, it's like assuming that if we had a real super intelligence right now that just could take all the literature of all the medical literature and then think about it and come up with a cure to cancer. Mm-hmm. And in fact, a lot of the things that we have to solve actually require experiments. Actually require delving. We simply don't know. We don't have enough data about. We actually have to perform experiments, which on living organisms like ourselves will take time to produce results. Okay? And now, the common response to that is, oh, well, this super thing is going to do simulations. Well, the only reason why a simulation would run faster than real life is if it's simpler. Okay? It's just collapsing the complexity to something so it can speed it up.
What if we have a much faster microprocessor that could run the simulation at, say, 1 trillion times faster than real-life processes?
Right, and so there's the idea that you mean the full complexity of life at a faster speed.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So we're kind of getting deep into this, but there is this idea of the Church-Turing hypothesis, which says that, in fact, all computations equal given unlimited time and space. Yeah. And that's the difference between reality and emulation, is that in reality, the matrix in which you perform some calculation actually makes a difference. Okay, so because you don't have unlimited time and space, any computation is bound by the matrix, and the matrix does affect whatever you get out of it. So I don't actually buy the idea that you can actually replicate a process in full on a different substrate. I don't think that works, because the assumption is that the things are equivalent, but that only is if you have unlimited time and space, and that's not true for real systems. And so I don't think it's possible to actually replicate, even no matter how fast you go, to replicate a living system fully in all its degrees on another system, and vice versa. So I reject at the very fundamental this idea of the equivalency of computation. And so I think the idea that having that being able to, and of course, downloading all that stuff, I have the same issues with it. The idea that we can actually speed up 1,000,000 times investigation of the real world by simulation, I think that we can learn a lot by it, and I think simulations will have a huge impact on the scientific method and what we know. But I don't believe that they're equivalent, and that therefore we can simply speed up and get answers. And so that's why I'm skeptical of that scenario as the only scenario that we have.
Yeah, and even here in your book, on page 332, you say that the only kind of mind I doubt will make many of is an artificial mind just like a human. The only way to reconstruct a viable human species of mind is to use tissue and cells, and why bother when making human babies is so easy?
Right. And so what I think is going to be much more profitable for us is to make alien types of minds. To actually, I think we have another fault of the Singularians, as maybe represented by Ray, is this idea that intelligence is a singular, that it's one thing. And actually, I think that we have really no idea what intelligence is, and it's probably like 100 different factors. And that means that, in fact, probably a lot of the biggest problems in terms of our understanding, or mysteries, this is called, a lot of the biggest mysteries in the universe are, we may have an intelligence that the humankind may not be able to solve by itself, and we may need other kinds of intelligences to actually comprehend the universe. And so what we may be able to do is invent other kinds of minds that will be smarter in certain dimensions from us, just like your calculator is smarter than you in arithmetic. And together, unified in some ways, we can actually collectively comprehend or answer some of these mysteries.
Well, again, I very much understand and accept your argument, but several alternatives do not seem incompatible to me with what you're proposing. Mm-hmm. So, for example, one such artificial intelligence could turn out to be the technium, eventually. Yes. A super intelligent, super powerful, absolutely, almighty computer spanning the whole globe,
yes, right.
Which can then in turn spawn intelligence across the galaxy first and then across the universe.
Sure. Okay.
Another option is all those tendencies that are biological tendencies that you mentioned, like mm-hmm. acceleration, greater mm-hmm. complexity, diversification, mm-hmm. They do seem to me at least to suggest that there may be a moment when alternative-based intelligences arise that could be of equal to human or better than human level of intelligence, right? So just like, for example, you say that you think that minds of human equality mm-hmm. would have to be based on tissue and cells just like humans, but say mm-hmm. People argued like that before the Wright brothers about flying, for example, right? They said, well, we can't build flying machines because you have to do it exactly like the birds with feathers, and they
right. Well, actually, I'm not right. No, I'm not saying that you can't have intelligence without flesh. If people said no, you can't have flying machines like birds without flesh, they'd be true, because the airplane flies nothing like a bird. I'm only saying that you can't have an intelligence like human intelligence without human tissue. But I don't think we need intelligence like human intelligence. I think I reject this idea of, like you say, exceeding human intelligence. I don't know what that means. Because, I mean, it's like saying we're going to make humans that exceed humans. What do you mean exceed humans? If we're going to make human bodies that exceed humans. You can say they exceed humans in a certain dimension. Maybe they run faster, or maybe they are bigger.
Well, I'll give you an example. For example, I was interviewing Professor Kevin Warwick from University of Reading a few weeks ago.
I know who he is.
And he was saying things such as, for example, I would like to be able to see in infrared or in ultraviolet, right?
Sure.
I would like to be able to do 1 trillion calculations per second. I would like to communicate with my wife via thought or via the internet via thought.
Sure.
And all those things. So when you put and you add extra dimensions in our capability to perceive of and our ability to process that incoming information multiplied by a factor of, 1 million, then you do come, I think, it seems to me, to a superhuman level of intelligence.
No, see, I think you have another kind of intelligence.
Well, yes, yes, you do. But yet there is some kind of continuity from us if we are the starting point, because he believes that through cyborgization of the human body, you can, and that's another issue, by the way, which you barely, you didn't really touch on.
But let's go back. So would you say that we're just basically super chimps?
No.
Why not?
Well, in a way, we're super bacteria. I mean, it would follow from your own book, right? We are the continuation, the current state of that process, which started in the primordial oceans in the form of bacteria, and then it's us, and then it's continuing to evolve because we are a process, not an entity.
But I mean, would you say that we're super chimps, even as an entity? That humans are super chimps because we're smarter than chimps. Now we're not as strong as chimps, and we're different in many ways. Yeah. But would you say we're super chimps?
I see your point, and I accept it. Yeah, I wouldn't say we're super chimps.
Right, and so we're different, and that's what I'm trying to say is that we're going to make. They will be super. They will exceed us in certain dimensions, but not necessarily all dimensions, because there's no reason to. And so it's this idea that there's only one dimension, that there's only one vector in intelligence, which I'm trying to reject. Mm-hmm. It's this idea that intelligence is many-forked, many different dimensions, highly complex. And if we're focused on just this idea that it's one long ladder and we're going to kind of accelerate it, and usually the acceleration is always just going faster. But in fact, most of these things are going to be going in directions that we haven't gone in. That's going to be the real excitement, is understanding that there are different ways to think that we have not even imagined yet. It's not just that we're going to be going faster. So there's this, I think this idea of the acceleration is blinding us with a single scenario. And that's sort of what I'm trying to reject.
Yeah, and I totally accept your point on that level, that it's only one of the potential scenarios probably. But also it seems to me, in my mind, as one of your cases of inevitable outcomes. Right, so you give the case of, say, the stripes of a tiger or the dots on the butterfly wings, and, the specific dots or stripes could be random, but all of them are having the same tendency of developing those innate tendencies, right? My understanding of artificial intelligence coming to be was kind of similar of it. Right.
Well, but let's rewind the tape of life and go back to the era of life when they were just maybe, sea cucumbers. Mm-hmm. And we say, what's the future of evolution? And if you said, well, it's obvious that the future of evolution is humans, you'd be right. But I would say, yes, the future of evolution is humans plus another million other species all interacting together. Yeah. It's humans and giraffes and apes and porpoises and whales. It's all those. It's not just humans.
So, well, for example, what would you say about a statement such as the one that Ray makes occasionally, which is to say that the goal of evolution is the dissemination or the spreading of intelligence, and the argument taken to the ultimate point is the giant computronium, or the moment when the universe wakes up and becomes intelligent. You do touch it as one of the options.
I mean, that's in fact, I just had dinner with James Gardner last night. He talks about the intelligent universe, and that's his omega point. Yeah. I'm a little bit allergic to the idea of the omega point, that there's a single destiny. And I'm much more of a pluralist. That I think that what technology brings us, what evolution brings us, which is increasing variety. And so we forget the fact that every living species alive today is as highly evolved as any other one. So I don't see it as a ladder. I see it as this kind of expanding circular tree bush where the horseshoe crab is as highly evolved as humans are. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's not as complex as we are, but it's gone through 4 billion years of learning and refinement, and so I see the technium spreading out in that same way, where there's not a single course. There is a progression, and so it's inevitable, I think, to have a planetary scale intelligence, but it won't be the only intelligence.
That's very, very fascinating. We're approaching the end of our interview, unfortunately. It went pretty fast. But I would like to ask you the last two questions that I traditionally ask of all my guests on the show. Okay. And the first one is, for all the people out there who hear or see you for the first time, what's the best place that they could go and look for more information or follow you in any way digitally, or connect to you via technology? Yeah,
my website, www.kk.org, has everything about me, and my email has been public for 25 years. It's kk@kk.org, and people can write to me.
Excellent. So, if there's one message that you would like to give to all of our viewers and listeners today, what would you like it to be?
That's a good one. Okay, so here's what it is. We collectively are involved in making more stuff, more technology, more artifacts. We're trying to make more stuff to sell. We're involved in buying stuff. So we're somehow or other, most of us are engaged in some ways of adding to the technium in some ways. And I think at times that can be very dispiriting, because it might resemble consumerism. Some of the stuff doesn't last very long, if it ever even gets made or sold. Even when it does, it's obsolete very fast. And there is a sense of really not being connected to something that seems very important, or else it's distracting, and we have these issues about the rate of change and the way it's maybe affecting our minds, and we also feel a little disjointed from this acceleration. And so I think while we're very technologically oriented, we're at unease often with this. And I'm saying that if we step back and look at the long-term trends in technology and show how actually its roots, the technium's roots, are in life, and the life's roots are actually all the way back to the Big Bang and any kind of exotropic systems, that we can step back and see that actually, no, this is there's a large story happening. There's an arc from the beginning of time through now that will work through our lives now and go beyond us, and that we can we're actually part of something bigger than just what's happening right now, selling stuff. And that bigger thing that we're part of, that we can align ourselves with, this sort of cosmic evolution story, is actually a story where we're bringing more choices and opportunities and options to people. And I think that's really, really good because all of us have a mix of different talents and abilities, but often it requires us to make something to allow those to express. And so maybe we are a musician, we need an instrument to be made to really fully express our genius, or maybe we need a certain camera or holodeck interface or some other gizmo. And there have been, we like to imagine the world in which Beethoven was born before the piano or the symphony, and what a loss that would be, or Jimi Hendrix before the amplifier was built. And today, somewhere in the world, there's a young boy or girl who's a genius, and maybe we haven't made their guitar yet for them, or the equivalent of the camera or the holodeck thing. And so I think we have an obligation to increase those possibilities so that everybody in the world would have some chance to express their unique genius to the world. And by participating in this long story, this long arc of increasing complexity and specialization, by aligning ourselves with that thing moving through history and beyond us, I think it gives us just some reason to keep making this stuff and imbues our lives with more meaning, understanding that we're doing good when we embrace technology.
So technology does not want a singularity, but wants increased opportunities, freedom, and diversification and ability to express and find out who we are.
Yes, I think it wants all those things. It wouldn't surprise me if a singularity-like thing was part of the mix, but I just have to emphasize that it's only one scenario or one option. And so I think the idea that we would move through something, a phase change, let's call it, where we move through something that whose origins or outlines or even behaviors we cannot see right now, that seems very reasonable to expect. We did that with language already once. We moved through language, and before language, we could not imagine the world of after language. And it's very possible that we could move into other states that we can't imagine right now because we're at the wrong scale. That seems inevitable. And in that sense, I think that is part of the inevitable future. But I don't think it's necessarily that it's going to be a super AI that makes a super AI in the next 30 years.
But in that case, do you think that, how would you judge our chances of surviving and going through all those, unparalleled changes that we would have to go through in the next several decades or centuries as a species?
I think if we imagine ourselves as exactly as we are right now, there's zero chance that we would survive. I think the only way we get through these things is that we are continually reinventing ourselves and changing our own nature. And so we're not the same people who came out of Africa. So basically they have not survived. Okay? Early pre-humans have not survived. They have changed. We have changed ourselves into who we are right now. We will change ourselves again in the future, and we will be different than we are right now.
Thank you, Kevin. I have to say that I did read your book with a great deal of interest, and for me, from my point of view, it was both fascinating and beautiful, and a very sort of one of the most poetic defenses of technology, and an optimistic one too. So it was just a pleasure to read, and I think I'll be rereading it, so I would recommend it to everyone.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your interest and kind words, and let me know if I can help again.